My name is Jordan Hayes. I'm 34. And I didn't realize a relationship could break in half without shouting, without a slammed door, without a scandal, until my fiancé said one sentence that made everything I'd built with him feel like a cheap prop. It wasn't even a confession. It was worse. It was an evaluation. Like I was a resume he'd finally decided wasn't strong enough to show his friends. 3 weeks ago, I was engaged to a man named Evan Whitmore, and I thought we were the kind of couple people secretly envied for being normal. We weren't flashy. We weren't constantly posting couple goals. We just worked. We'd been together for 4 years, engaged for 6 months. We met through mutual friends at a summer barbecue when I was 30. I remember Evan standing near the cooler, laughing too loud, like he wanted everyone to know he belonged in the center of the circle. He had this effortless charm, the kind that makes strangers feel like they've known you for years. He worked in PR for a mid-sized firm downtown. Fast-paced, image-heavy, always talking about perception like it was oxygen. I did project coordination for a logistics company. Not glamorous, but steady. Solid pay, decent benefits, and I liked being the person who kept chaos from turning into catastrophe. For the first few years, life with Evan was genuinely good. We took trips, nothing insane but meaningful. National parks, road trips down the coast, cheap motels with clean sheets and bad coffee. We'd laugh at the same dumb jokes. We could spend a whole weekend together without needing an itinerary to prove we were happy. He got along with my friends. I got along with his. We talked about the future the way couples do when they're serious but not rushing. Kids someday, maybe a house with a yard. The standard soft dreams that feel warm because they aren't complicated yet. When he proposed, it felt right. Natural. Like the next step, not a performance. He'd saved up for a ring. Nothing outrageous, but beautiful. A diamond that caught the light when I moved my hand like it had its own heartbeat. I cried when he got down on one knee at this overlook we'd hiked to. The wind was sharp, the sky wide and pale, and for a moment I believed in that clean, movie-like certainty. He posted about it on social media immediately, of course. That didn't bother me. Evan liked the world watching his happiness. I told myself it was harmless. His friends commented with congratulations and heart emojis. Everything looked perfect. But over time, I started noticing patterns, little shifts that felt like a draft coming under a closed door. Evan had about 6 close friends he'd known since college. They did guys' nights every other week, weekend trips, had a tight group chat that seemed to buzz nonstop. I never had a problem with it. Relationships need space, separate friend groups, breathing room. But I noticed something. After Evan spent time with them, he came home, different. Not mean, not cruel, just more aware. More aware of what other people had, more likely to mention that someone's girlfriend got surprised with a designer bag, or that someone's fiancé upgraded them to first class just because, or that one of his friends just leased a car that cost more than my yearly rent. At first, I thought it was just PR culture, people who treat status like a scoreboard. But it wasn't occasional. It was constant. Every conversation somehow circled back to money, titles, neighborhoods, who was moving up, who was stagnant, who was worth more. And slowly, so slowly, I didn't catch it at first. Evan started looking at life like a display window. Like if we didn't look expensive enough from the outside, we weren't winning. The first time I felt the sting was at his friend Brandon's birthday party, about 8 months into our engagement. It was a nice place, good food, normal party stuff, but the conversation kept circling back to engagements and weddings. Who had the biggest ring? Whose venue was exclusive? Who was honeymooning where? Who had a fiancé with real money? A woman named Sabrina, Evan's ex-girlfriend, the one he always claimed was ancient history, was there, holding her hand out like a spotlight. Her ring was absurd, huge, custom designed, the kind of thing that doesn't say love, it says purchase. Everyone oohed and sighed and acted like they were witnessing a miracle. Then someone asked to see mine. I held my hand up, smiling politely. And I swear, I felt Evan tense beside me. Not because he was proud, because he was bracing. Sabrina tilted her head and said, "Oh, that's nice. Very classic." Classic. The word landed like a soft slap. Not an insult you could call out. Not something you could confront without sounding insecure. But the tone made it clear. Classic meant boring. Classic meant small. Classic meant not impressive. I didn't say anything. I didn't make a scene. I told myself it was just social comparison nonsense. But that moment stayed. Because later, in the car, Evan didn't say, "Ignore them." He said lightly, like he was joking, "They're kind of intense about that stuff." And he laughed. But he didn't sound amused. He sounded aware. Looking back now, that might have been the moment the seed got planted in his head. That maybe what we had, steady, real, ordinary, wasn't enough to show off. The breaking point came 3 weeks ago on a Wednesday night. Completely ordinary, nothing special about it. I got off work around 6 Hanoi, stopped by his favorite Thai place, grabbed pad Thai for him, drunken noodles for me, spring rolls to share. I showed up at his apartment around 6:30. The second I walked in, I could tell something was off. Evan was on the couch with his laptop open, barely looked up when I came through the door, and usually he'd at least pause, give me a kiss, ask about my day. This time, nothing. Just a distracted hey, eyes back on the screen. I set the food on the counter, unpacked everything, grabbed plates, asked if he wanted to eat at the table or the couch. I don't care, he said. Flat. I brought everything to the coffee table and sat down beside him. He closed his laptop but kept his phone in his hand, checking it every 30 seconds like he was waiting for permission to say what he'd already decided. We ate in this weird silence. I tried asking about his day. Short answers. I tried telling him something funny that happened at work. Half smile, no warmth. Finally, I put my fork down and asked directly, "What's going on? You've been acting strange since I got here." Evan set his food down too, didn't look at me. I had lunch with his guys today. Okay, I said carefully. How was it? He sighed, heavy, like my question was already exhausting. They were asking about the wedding, he said, about you, about our plans. Something in his tone tightened my stomach. What about me? They were just asking normal questions, he said, still avoiding my eyes. What you do, what your family's like, what kind of future we're building. You know, typical stuff. He hesitated. Then the next words came out like he was reading them off a script someone else wrote. And honestly, Jordan, they brought up some concerns. I felt my throat go cold. What kind of concerns? He finally looked at me, just for a second, and I saw something there that didn't belong in a relationship. Calculation. They think I could do better, he said. That I might be settling. For a moment, the room didn't sound real anymore, like I'd stepped underwater. Your friends think you're settling by marrying me. Not in those exact words, he said quickly, but they do think you're not as ambitious as you could be, that your career is kind of stagnant. Stagnant, like I was a pond with no current. And the more I've thought about it since lunch, he added, voice speeding up, maybe they have a valid point. I stared at him. Valid point about what? About whether we're truly compatible long-term, he said. I want more out of life, Jordan. I want to travel first class, not economy. I want to live in a neighborhood people are impressed by. I want our kids in private school, not public. Can you honestly provide that kind of lifestyle? The cold settled into my chest so hard it felt physical, like a weight. I make good money, I said slowly. We've talked about this before. You never said any of this was a problem. I know, he said, but talking to them made me realize I haven't been thinking big enough. There was a slight tremor in his voice, like he wasn't fully in control of what he was admitting. They think I should be with someone more impressive. More impressive. As if love was supposed to make other people jealous. As if my value depended on how strangers reacted to my presence. I nodded once, very calmly. So your friends don't think I'm impressive enough, I said. And now you agree with them. I'm just being honest about my concerns. I felt something inside me go still. Not broken. Not frantic. Just finished. I stood up. Okay, I said. Evan blinked. Okay? If you think you can do better than me, I said, voice steady. Go ahead and try. He frowned. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm not auditioning for your love, I said. Not for you, not for your friends. Either you want to marry me or you don't. Jordan, don't be dramatic. I let out a quiet laugh, more disbelief than humor. I'm not being dramatic, I said. I'm being clear. You just told me you're settling, so don't settle. His face shifted, surprise, then irritation, like he couldn't believe I wasn't begging to be chosen. So you're breaking up with me over this? He snapped. You're breaking up with me, I corrected softly. You just did it out loud. I'm simply accepting it. I picked up my bag. I'll bring the ring back tomorrow, I said. You're free to aim higher. And then I walked out of his apartment like my heart wasn't shaking inside my ribs. Like the hallway wasn't spinning. Like I hadn't just watched 4 years turn into a status review. But the moment the elevator doors closed, and I saw my own reflection in the mirrored wall, eyes bright with shock, mouth set like stone, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't going to end with me leaving. This was going to end with Evan trying to rewrite what happened. Because people like him didn't just lose quietly. They controlled the story. And I was about to become the villain in his. I drove home in complete silence. No music, no podcast, no angry phone call to a friend with shaking hands. Just the soft hum of the highway and the sound of my own breath. Thin, controlled, like if I breathed too deeply, I might fall apart right there behind the steering wheel. When I got to my apartment, I didn't even turn on the main lights. I kicked off my shoes in the entryway and walked into the living room with only the glow from the streetlights outside. Everything looked the same. My couch, my throw blanket folded neatly over one arm, the framed photo on the shelf of me and Evan at a canyon overlook, sunburned and smiling. That picture felt like it belonged to strangers. I sat down, and for a long time, I did nothing. No crying, no screaming into a pillow, no dramatic "how could he" pacing. Just stillness. My mind kept looping back to the same line. They think I could do better. Not we're having issues. Not I'm scared about the future. Not even I'm not sure we want the same things. No. His friends had held me up against some invisible standard. Money, titles, prestige, and Evan had nodded along like my entire existence was up for public scoring. 4 years reduced to a dinner conversation I wasn't even at. By 11 p.m., something shifted inside me. The hurt didn't disappear, but it hardened, like wet cement finally setting. Evan wanted impressive? Fine, he could have it. But he wasn't taking my time, my money, and my dignity with him. I got up, turned on the lights, opened my laptop, and searched my email for anything wedding-related. There it all was, threads upon threads. Venue deposits, vendor contracts, reservation confirmations, seating chart drafts, payment receipts. And the ugly truth stared back at me in cold numbers. I had paid for about 70% of the wedding. Not because Evan was broke, he wasn't, but because we'd agreed early on that I'd cover most of the upfront costs, and he'd save for the honeymoon since he wanted something unforgettable. At the time, it felt like teamwork. Now it felt like I'd financed my own humiliation. I started with the venue, a place an hour outside the city, gardens, indoor-outdoor setup, expensive enough to make Evan's friends sigh in approval. There was an emergency contact number in the email thread. I called. It was late. Someone answered, sounding annoyed, until I said clearly, I need to cancel a wedding reservation scheduled for next month. The pause was immediate. The voice softened. They asked for my name. I gave it. They asked if everything was okay. I almost laughed. No, I said simply, but it's final. They explained the deposit was non-refundable. $3,000. Okay, I said, cancel it. My finger hovered for half a second before I hit send on the cancellation confirmation. Then I moved on. Caterer, photographer, florist, DJ, cake, shuttle service for guests. One by one, I canceled everything that had my credit card attached to it. Some deposits were refunded. Most weren't. But here's the thing I didn't expect. I didn't care. Not in that numb, reckless way people imagine when they think of heartbreak. In a different way. A clean way. Like I was cutting out a tumor and watching the blood spill, knowing it was the only way I'd live. By the time I finished, it was almost 2 a.m. My inbox looked like a battlefield. Automated confirmations, polite condolences, we're sorry to hear. And every time I saw the words, we're sorry, I felt less sorry. Because I wasn't the one who broke us. I was the one who refused to beg for permission to stay. Thursday morning, I woke up with my jaw clenched so hard my head ached. There was a moment, just a flicker, where I almost reached for my phone. Almost checked to see if Evan had texted some frantic apology. Then I remembered his face. The way he'd said settling, like he was doing me a favor. And the urge died in my hand. The ring was next. It wasn't just jewelry. It was a symbol of a future Evan had apparently decided wasn't shiny enough for his audience. The ring had cost $8,000. Money I'd saved over a year. Cutting back on takeout, skipping a vacation, taking overtime shifts when I could, because I believed in us. At the jeweler, the clerk took one look at my face and didn't ask questions. He just nodded like he'd seen this story 1,000 times. They had a 90-day return policy, but with a 20% restocking fee. So instead of $8,000, I got $6,500 back. He handed me a check. I walked out into the parking lot and just stood there, staring at it. Not because I was devastated, because I was amazed at how quickly something I'd once held like a dream could turn into a receipt. 6 months ago, I'd been excited picking that ring out. My hands had shaken, not from fear, but from happiness. Now my hands were steady. That was the scariest part. How calm I was. How done. I sat in my car and typed a text to Evan. It took me less than 10 seconds. Ring has been returned. All wedding vendors I paid for are canceled. You're free to aim higher now. Then I hit send. And I didn't wait for a response. I drove home. The call came immediately. I watched my phone buzz in the cup holder like it was a trapped insect. I didn't pick up. He called again and again. By lunchtime, it was almost funny, like watching a person sprint into a wall over and over, convinced the next hit would break through. He started texting. Jordan, please. I didn't mean it like that. Let's talk. Then the messages shifted. You're seriously doing this? You're throwing away 4 years? He called from his work phone. Blocked. Then from an unknown number. Blocked. Then came the classic move. Texts from his friends' phones. As if the problem was access. As if the only thing stopping him from fixing this was getting a message through. I blocked every number that tried. That first week felt surreal, like I was watching my own life from behind glass. Mutual friends reached out. Some were genuinely concerned. Are you okay? What happened? Can you two work it out? Others had an edge. You overreacted. People say things when they're stressed. Evan's devastated. I didn't explain myself to anyone. Not because I couldn't, because I didn't want to. If someone needed me to prove I deserved respect after hearing settling, they weren't my people. My best friend, Chris, came over that Saturday night with pizza and 0 questions. He just sat on the floor with me in sweatpants, the box open between us, and let me talk. When I finally stopped, he said something that lodged in my brain like a hook. Anyone who makes you audition for their love isn't worth having. I stared at the wall and nodded, because it was true. And I didn't realize how true it was until Chris told me something else, almost casually, like he didn't understand he was about to reopen the wound. He'd run into Brittany, one of Evan's closest friends, from his old job. They'd bumped into each other at a coffee shop. Brittany had smiled and said, "So, are you still coming to the wedding?" Chris had blinked. What wedding? And Brittany had looked confused. Because Evan, my ex-fiancé, had not told anyone we were done. He was still posting wedding planning content on social media, still sharing countdown-style posts, still commenting under other people's engagement announcements like he was next in line. According to Evan's story, we were taking a short break. I was just stressed with work. I needed space. But the wedding was still on. When Chris told me that, I felt something I hadn't felt all week. Not heartbreak. Not sadness. Rage. Because denial is one thing. But rewriting reality? That was something else. It meant Evan didn't see our breakup as a decision. He saw it as a tantrum he could wait out. Like if he held his breath long enough, I'd come back. Like my no didn't count unless it was loud enough to embarrass him. I looked at Chris, my voice calm, but my stomach burning. He's telling people we're still getting married. Chris nodded slowly. Yeah. I stared down at my hands. And that was the moment I realized something important. Evan wasn't just upset. He was strategizing. And strategy meant this wasn't over. Not even close. Because if he was willing to lie to everyone about us being fine, then what else was he willing to do? To keep the version of the story where he doesn't lose? By the second week after the breakup, life had started to feel almost normal again. Not good, not healed, but functional. I threw myself into work, took on extra projects, stayed late, let my brain chew on spreadsheets and timelines instead of memories. I started going back to the gym. Nothing dramatic, just enough to remind myself my body still existed outside heartbreak. Some days, I'd go hours without thinking about Evan. That felt like progress. I honestly thought the worst part was behind me. I was wrong. That Saturday night, the one that cracked everything wide open, I was already in bed, half asleep, scrolling mindlessly on my phone. It was just before 3 a.m. when my screen lit up with an incoming call from a number I didn't recognize. Normally, I wouldn't have answered. But something about the timing, something instinctive and wrong, made my thumb hesitate. Then swipe. Hello? There was a sharp inhale on the other end, then sobbing, the kind that sounds like someone is trying not to throw up. Jordan? A woman's voice said, barely holding together. I'm so sorry to call you this late. I don't know what else to do. I sat up in bed. Who is this? It's Lauren, she said. Evan's friend. I'm his best man's girlfriend. I shouldn't be calling you, but I can't be part of this anymore. My heart started pounding. Lauren, what's going on? She took a shaky breath. We're in Nashville, Evan's bachelor weekend. And Jordan, I can't let him do this to you. The room seemed to tilt. Do what? She started crying harder. He finally told everyone the truth tonight. About why you broke up, about what he said to you. My fingers tightened around the phone. And then he told us his plan. I swung my legs over the side of the bed. What plan? There was a long pause. Then she said it. He's not accepting the breakup. The words landed heavy, but not surprising. I know that, I said slowly. He's been pretending we're still together. Yes, she said quickly. But it's worse than that. Jordan. He thinks if he just keeps planning the wedding, you'll go through with it. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? He rebooked everything, she said. The venue, the caterer, the photographer, everything you canceled. He's been charging it to his credit cards and borrowing money from his parents. He told us tonight that he knows you were just upset and that when the wedding day comes, you'll show up because you won't want to embarrass him in front of everyone. I felt ice crawl up my spine. That's insane, I said. We broke up, I told him clearly. I know, Lauren sobbed. That's why I'm calling you. He's not okay. He's convinced himself this is just a phase, that if he acts like everything is normal, it will become normal. I pressed my free hand to my forehead. Where is he right now? Passed out, she said. But before he did, he said something else. Her voice cracked completely, something that made me feel sick. My pulse roared in my ears. What did he say? Lauren's breath hitched. He said that if you don't show up to the wedding, he'll tell everyone you were abusive. The word rang in my head like a gunshot. Abusive, I repeated, numb. Yes, she whispered. He said he'd tell people you were controlling, that you manipulated him, that you backed out last minute and he had to call it off for his own safety. He said no one would question it, that everyone would feel sorry for him. The room started spinning. He said that out loud? Yes, she cried, in front of people. And Jordan, listen to me, I have proof. My chest felt hollow. What kind of proof? I've been screenshotting his messages all week, she said. The group chat, the things he's been saying. I didn't know how bad it was at first, but something felt wrong. Tonight confirmed it. My voice came out flat and steady in a way that surprised me. Send me everything. I am, she said immediately. I'm sending it all right now. My phone buzzed, then buzzed again, and again. Screenshot after screenshot flooded in. Messages from Evan to his friends, laid out in black and white. She'll come around. She's just being dramatic. She won't humiliate me in front of 150 people. If she doesn't show, I'll just tell everyone she was controlling. I'll say I had to cancel. Everyone already believes me. I told my parents she's stressed with work. I scrolled, feeling colder with each line. This wasn't emotional venting. This was planning, premeditation. I'm so sorry, Lauren said through tears. I should have said something sooner. I didn't realize how far gone he was. You did the right thing, I said quietly. You did it when it mattered. She sniffed. What are you going to do? I stared at the wall across from my bed, my reflection faint in the dark window. Protect myself, I said, and make sure he can't do this to anyone. After we hung up, I didn't sleep. I sat there rereading the screenshots until the sun started bleeding into the sky. This wasn't heartbreak anymore. This was something else entirely. This was a man who had decided that if he couldn't have me willingly, he'd take my reputation hostage. And I knew one thing with absolute clarity. I couldn't afford to stay silent anymore. Sunday morning arrived without sleep. My apartment looked the same, but I didn't feel like the same person sitting at my kitchen table with my laptop open and my phone buzzing every few minutes with screenshots I'd already memorized. I kept replaying one sentence in my head. If she doesn't show, I'll just tell everyone she was abusive. That wasn't heartbreak talking. That was strategy. And strategy meant I had to stop reacting like a wounded ex and start thinking like someone whose entire life could be detonated by a lie. At 8:02 a.m., I called a lawyer. My uncle practiced corporate law, so he wasn't the right person, but he knew someone who was. He gave me a number and told me to call immediately. The man who answered sounded mildly annoyed at being woken up on a Sunday. I apologized once, then told him everything. The lunch conversation, the breakup, the cancellations, the lies, the rebooked vendors, the screenshots, the threat. He didn't interrupt. He just listened. When I finished, there was a pause on the line, long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. Then he said carefully, "Okay, first, breathe. Second, you did the right thing by saving everything." What do I do? I asked. Right now, he said, you document. You don't engage emotionally, and you get ahead of this. He explained it plainly. Planning to lie wasn't illegal, yet, but threatening to make false accusations, especially with written proof of intent, could become defamation the moment Evan followed through. And the screenshots? They're gold, he said bluntly. They show premeditation. That matters. I wrote everything down. Dates, times, names, who said what, who knew when. Do not delete anything, he added. Not a text, not an email, not a voicemail. And whatever you do, don't meet him alone. Don't argue. Don't try to clear things up. I swallowed. There's one more thing, he said. If his parents are reasonable people, they may be your strongest firewall right now. The thought made my stomach twist. I didn't want to involve them, but Evan already had. He'd dragged them into his version of reality, using their money, their trust, their belief that I was just stressed and would come back. They deserve to know the truth, the lawyer continued. And frankly, it's better they hear it from you with proof than from him after he's spun a narrative. I hung up an hour later with a legal checklist and a knot in my chest. There was one call I'd been avoiding since the breakup, one call that felt like crossing a line I couldn't uncross. But now, not making it felt more dangerous than making it. I stared at Evan's father's contact name on my phone. Then I pressed call. He answered on the third ring. "Jordan," he said warmly. "Good to hear from you. Evan mentioned you two were working through some things. I was actually hoping—" "No," I said gently but firmly. "Sir, we are not working through things, and I need to talk to you about something serious." The warmth in his voice disappeared instantly. "Okay," he said, "what's going on?" I didn't soften it. I didn't dance around it. I told him the truth. That Evan and I had broken up 3 weeks ago. That I had ended the engagement. That I had canceled the wedding. That his son had refused to accept it. That he'd rebooked vendors using his parents' money. That he'd threatened to falsely accuse me of abuse if I didn't show up to a wedding I never agreed to attend. There was silence on the other end. Long. Heavy. Then he spoke, his voice lower, sharper. "That's a very serious accusation, Jordan." "I know," I said. "That's why I'm calling you, and that's why I have proof." I told him about the screenshots, about Lauren's call, about the group chat messages spelling out Evan's plan in plain text. "Can you send me what you have?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "I'm emailing it to you right now." I stayed on the line as he opened the files. I could hear the faint clicking of keys. The silence stretched again, only this time it felt different. When he finally spoke, his voice had changed. Flattened, aged. "Give me a few hours," he said. "I need to talk to my wife and to my son." He called back 2.5 hours later. I'd spent the entire time pacing, my nerves stretched tight as wire. When my phone rang, I answered immediately. "I spoke with Evan," his father said. "And?" "He admits he's been in denial," he said. "He claims he wouldn't have actually made false accusations, that he was angry, talking out of hurt." I closed my eyes. "With all due respect," I said quietly, "people say what they mean when they're upset. And this wasn't one comment. It was weeks of planning." There was a pause. "I agree," he said, "which is why this stops now." He told me they were bringing Evan home from Nashville immediately, that there would be a family intervention, that he would personally contact every vendor and cancel everything, again. And then he said something I hadn't expected. "For what it's worth, Jordan, I think my son made a terrible mistake. You were always good to him, good to our family. I'm deeply sorry for what he's put you through." The tightness in my chest eased, just a little. "Thank you," I said, "for taking this seriously." "If he contacts you again," he said, "you call me, immediately." When the call ended, I sank onto the couch and finally let myself exhale. Not relief. Not yet. But something close to safety. Because for the first time since Evan said the word settling, I wasn't alone in the truth anymore. And once the truth had witnesses, his version of reality didn't stand a chance. The fallout didn't come all at once. It came in waves. Quiet phone calls. Awkward silences. Group chats going dead without explanation. Evan's parents did exactly what his father promised. They brought him home from Nashville early, cut the trip short in a way that couldn't be spun as romantic persistence or stress relief. According to Lauren, they didn't yell. They didn't scream. That would have been easier for Evan to dismiss. Instead, they sat him down at the kitchen table like adults do when they're done pretending nothing is wrong. His parents, Evan, and his older sister, the one who had always been suspiciously quiet about the engagement. They made him read the screenshots out loud. Every message, every line where he'd convinced himself I'd come around. Every sentence where he'd casually planned to destroy my reputation if I didn't. Lauren told me later that halfway through, Evan's voice started shaking. Not from remorse, from being exposed. Because it's one thing to believe your own lies when they live safely inside your head. It's another thing to hear them echo in a room where no one is impressed. No one is jealous. And no one is buying the performance. His parents didn't argue with him about whether he meant it. They focused on what mattered. "You said it. You planned it. You involved other people. You used our money." There was no room left for denial. That same afternoon, Evan's father personally called every vendor. Again. This time, not as the excited father of the groom, but as a man cleaning up a mess he never should have been part of. Every reservation was canceled. Every deposit forfeited. Every just-in-case option eliminated. There would be no wedding day ambush, no public pressure, no moment where I'd be forced to either comply or be humiliated. The illusion collapsed. And once it did, everything around it started to crumble too. The friend group didn't implode with drama. It fractured with discomfort. Lauren texted me updates over the next few days. Short, stunned messages that sounded like someone watching a building collapse in slow motion. Some of Evan's friends were furious. Not at me. At him. They felt manipulated, used, and dragged into a fake reality where they'd been cheering for something that didn't exist. Two of them, guys who'd already booked flights, taken time off work, rearranged schedules, cut him off almost immediately. They didn't want to be associated with someone who thought threatening a false abuse claim was an acceptable backup plan. Others reacted differently. Predictably. They minimized. He was hurting. He didn't mean it. He just panicked. Lauren shut that down harder than I ever could have. There's a difference between heartbreak and premeditation, she told them, and you're crossing it by defending him. The group chat went silent not long after. Years of shared jokes, plans, inside language, gone. No dramatic exit, just absence. The kind that says, we all know this can't be fixed. A few days later, Evan emailed me. 10 paragraphs. I stared at the subject line for a full minute before opening it. Half apology, half justification. He said he was confused, influenced by the wrong people, not thinking clearly. He insisted he would never have followed through on the accusations. That it was just angry talk. That he loved me. That he understood now that we were truly over. And then, buried near the end, the ask. Could we meet for coffee? Just once. For closure. To part on better terms. I read it twice. Then I sat there, phone in my hand, letting the weight of it settle. Closure. As if threatening to ruin my life was just a misunderstanding that could be smoothed over with lattes and sad smiles. As if the version of him that existed in that group chat wasn't real. I didn't respond. I didn't draft a reply. I didn't block him either. I just deleted the email. Because closure isn't something you receive from the person who tried to burn you down. It's something you give yourself the moment you stop explaining. A week later, Lauren told me Evan had started seeing a counselor. Not by choice. By condition. His parents made continued financial support dependent on it. Apparently, that requirement embarrassed him more than the breakup ever did. Good. Embarrassment was overdue. Around the same time, I heard he was transferring offices. New city, new start. A quiet exit. It made sense. In a city this size, stories like this don't stay contained. They leak through friends of friends, through coworkers, through casual conversations at bars and gyms and birthday parties. I never told the story publicly. I didn't post. I didn't set the record straight. I didn't need to. The truth moved faster than I ever could. And Evan? He became the cautionary tale. The guy who cared more about being impressive than being honest. The guy who mistook control for love. By the time I realized it, the worst had already passed. Not because I fought, but because I refused to play along. And that, more than anything, was what he never saw coming. By the time the dust finally settled, my life didn't look dramatically different from the outside. Same apartment, same job, same city. But everything felt different. Lighter. Like I'd been carrying something heavy for years without realizing it. And the moment Evan said the word settling, my body dropped the weight automatically. I didn't spiral. I built routines. Work filled the quiet first. A new logistics project landed on my desk. Tight deadlines, high visibility, the kind of thing that demanded focus and rewarded competence. I stayed late. I stayed sharp. Not to prove anything to anyone, but because it felt good to be needed for the right reasons. The gym became non-negotiable. Not revenge fitness, not transformation for Instagram. Just movement, sweat, progress I could measure. 5 days a week, sometimes 6. Small victories mattered. I slept better. I laughed more. I stopped flinching every time my phone buzzed. And slowly I realized something surprising. I wasn't angry anymore. Relief had replaced it. Relief that I'd seen the truth before a marriage license turned manipulation into legal obligation. Relief that the lie unraveled before it could brand my name. Relief that I listened to the quiet voice inside me that said, walk away now. A few weeks later, I ran into Ashley, the friend, the one who'd started the whole is she impressive enough conversation at that lunch. I was waiting for my coffee when she approached me, hands tucked awkwardly into her jacket pockets like she didn't know what to do with them. Jordan, she said softly, can I talk to you for a second? I nodded. She looked genuinely uncomfortable. I owe you an apology, she said, for what I said to Evan about you. It was shallow, judgmental, and completely out of line. I didn't interrupt. She swallowed. I asked if he thought you were ambitious enough for the lifestyle he wanted, if you could provide what he'd always talked about wanting. There it was. Out loud. Raw. I was projecting, she continued, my own relationship insecurities, my own obsession with status, and I fed right into Evan's worst instincts. She looked at the floor. I didn't know he was planning to force the wedding. I didn't know about the threats. When I heard, I was horrified. I believed her, because denial looks different than shame. Thank you for saying that, I told her. It takes guts. She nodded once and walked away, leaving her apology behind like something fragile she didn't expect me to carry. I sat there with my coffee afterward, thinking about what she'd said. Evan probably did love me, in his way. But love that folds under peer pressure isn't partnership. Love that needs applause isn't stable. Love that turns cruel when it feels small isn't safe. That realization brought peace, not bitterness. The $6,500 from the ring sits in a savings account. I haven't touched it, not because it hurts, because it reminds me that walking away costs less than staying would have. Evan's parents sent me a card. Just a short note. We're sorry for everything. Thank you for handling the situation with maturity. It surprised me. I appreciated it. But it didn't reopen anything. Some doors close for a reason. Lauren and I still talk occasionally. Nothing heavy. Just check-ins. She still feels guilty for not speaking up sooner. I keep telling her the same thing. You spoke up when it mattered. That 2:47 a.m. call probably saved me from a nightmare I didn't fully understand until it was almost real. Evan moves cities. New office, new start. I hope the counseling helps him. Truly. But his healing isn't my responsibility. It never was. The strangest part of all this? How many people quietly told me I'd made the right choice? Friends I hadn't spoken to in years. Acquaintances who said they'd always felt something was off about Evan's obsession with image. Even someone from his extended family reached out to say they were sorry it ended this way. It felt validating and sad, because it meant the red flags had been there all along. I just hadn't been looking for them. It's been 2 months now. I'm doing better than I expected. Not because I won, but because I chose myself before the damage became permanent. I didn't leave dramatically. I didn't expose him publicly. I didn't scream. I walked away quietly. And in doing that, I kept my name, my peace, my future. If there's one thing I know now, it's this. Anyone who needs you to be impressive for them to love you will eventually punish you for being human. I don't need to be impressive. I need to be safe. And for the first time in a long time, I am.